Hi. Human being naturally wants to learn. We have natural desire for learning. But how can we learn? There is a man called Albert Bandura who really searched for the answer of these questions. Albert Bandura, he's a psychologist who developed the theory of social learning approach. Uh, what is special about Bandura is that Albert Bandura renew our understanding about human behavior. He, he is the one who leads the cognitive revolution in human sciences and psychology. Albert Bandura agreed with behaviorists and it said that yes, behavior is something can be learned. Until that point, he agreed with behaviorist approach. But after that, he said human learning is more than what behaviorists said because there is a cognitive side of human learning. So he brings cognitive elements in order to understand human behavior. And he said something more. And he said that there is a social dimension of human learning. So cognitive and social dimension, there are two dimensions Albert Bandura in his theory emphasize. Bandura's approach has been called as observational learning. Observational learning means that we are learning when we observe other people's. We are learning from our observation of other people. So Albert Bandura is making other people as the source of our learning. So this is very important idea. Of course, when we observe other people's behavior, our learning is getting strength and naturally or just observationally we are internalized what we learn from other people. So this way of learning Albert Bandura calls vicarious reinforcement. So reinforcement in behaviorist theory occupies a central place. According to behaviorists, it is reinforcement which controls our behavior. But Albert Bandura said that it is not reinforcement, but it is observation. It is other people who guides and control uh, our behavior. So Albert Bandura makes other people as a means of learning, and he said that our learning processes mediated through cognition. So these are the basic explanation or central thesis of Albert Bandura. So the question is, what is the source of our observational learning? The answer which is given by Bandura is modeling. Modeling is the source of observational learning. So we are learning through observing other or taking other as a model for ourselves. Again, this shows that reinforcement is not the main or direct source of learning in the theory of Bandura. So what is modeling? Modeling basically means you are observing the behaviors of others. These others, of course, considered for you as a model, and you follow or you behave the way they behaved. You think that if you behave the way these models behave, you are going to get what you desire or what you want to gain. So, uh, in order to uh, show or in order to base his theory on empirical data, Albert Bandura conducted one of the most famous experiments in the history of psychology. This experiment called Bobodol experiment. Basically, children first they watched some aggressive behavior. After these children watching this aggressive behavior, in one room, these children show very aggressive behavior to a doll called Bobo doll. So that means that watching an aggressive behavior makes people more aggressive or lead people to behave in an aggressive way. So this idea, I think, is very important. If aggression is something can be learned, similarly, peaceful behavior also can be learned. So aggression is not something which is a part of our nature. It is something we learn in artificial ways. So I think Albert Bandura, by making this Bobo doll experiment, changed our perception about aggression. So this is very important. If aggression is a matter of learning, it is a matter of education. Similarly, peace also must be a matter of learning, a matter of education. If we educate ourselves, if we learn peace through educational activities, violence, wars, fanaticism, many global problems can be solved. And of course, Albert Bandura shows shows another important issue. He thinks that media has great influence on human behavior, because when people watch models, actors in television, in cinema, and so on, they are taking them as a model, as an idol, and they try to be like them, or they try to behave the way they behave. So, Albert Bandura, he is also one of the pioneers who shows the effects of media on human behavior. Of course, when people watch the behavior of modeling person or example, observing someone's behavior who considered to be as an example, people said that, wow, if man is behaving this way, I am going to behave the same. So if this man behave in an aggressive way, so I can make aggression the way I want to do. So when people saw unobservable behavior in the behaviors of others, they are also behaving the way they do. They are not inhibiting or suppressing their aggressive desire or undesirable behavior. So at this point, Albert Bandura is talking about the concept of disinhibition. People behave more freely without any restriction when they observe the behaviors of other people. Of course, observational learning is something serious. There are four stages in observational learning. The first one is attentional process. So the first thing is you have to pay serious attention to other behaviors cognitively and perceptually. If you are not aware if you don't pay too much attention to the behavior of other people, certainly you are not going to learn anything from their behavior. But if you focus on others' behavior cognitively and perceptually, that means that you are taking other people as a model, and after that you are going to imitate most probably their behavior. Yes, attention is first if we want to learn something from others. But attention is not enough. We need also retention. We need to retain and remember other people's behavior in order to repeat them later. So, uh, other people's behavior somehow must be encoded in our mental structure, our cognitive structure. Uh, and we pay attention, we memorize this behavior in our cognition, and the time is for production. So the cognitive image we have about the behavior we observed before, when times come, we translate it to physical behavior in necessary circumstances. And the final one, if we want to practice a behavior which we learn from other people, we must have a motivation. We must have incentive for it. If we don't have a motivation for behavior, we are not going to show that behavior. I think the example of learning uh, driving a car is a good example. If we want to learn to drive a car, first we have to pay our attention the way how our drivers education how teacher behave during driver's education class. We have to pay our attention to his how the way he drive a car, and then we have to keep his behavior in our cognition and then we have to imitate him the way he drives a car, and then we must have motivation for driving a car. We must say, I should drive a car because, I mean, there must be a sort of motivation. Something must mobilize you in order to drive a car. So, uh, uh, when we learn something from other people's behavior, uh, Albert Bandura said that there is no need for behaving through observation as a result of getting external reinforcement. Maybe if you think that if you behave this way, you are going to get rewards or punishment. You yourself determines if you behave this behavior, whether it will be rewarding or punishing experience for you. It is you decide. Albert Bandura used the concept of self-reinforcement. And the other concept Albert Bandura is using is very important. He said that the concept of self-efficacy. The concept of self-efficacy means that when we cope with the problems in life, what are we feeling? The feelings we have about our adequacy, about our efficiency, our competence, means self-efficacy. I mean, whether you think that you can do that or the feeling of whether you can do this behavior or not. If you think that, if you believe that you can, this is your self-efficacy. Albert Bandura definitely believed that human behavior can be controlled by cognitive processes, by environment and social situation. He used the concept of reciprocal determinism. It means that cognitive processes and environment mutually controls and determines our behavior. But at the same time, yes, he talks about reciprocal determinism, but at the same, that does not mean that Albert Bandura don't believe human freedom. He thinks that human individual have freedom. They have freedom which behavior they should practice or which behavior they shouldn't. So we are not just passive victims of environment. We are also active shapers the environment around us. So I think what we learned from Albert Bandura is this: social learning theory teaches us a very important lesson. Albert Bandura said that if you want to regulate your behavior, be aware of yourself and reinforce yourself. As long as you are aware of yourself and reinforce yourself, you are going to be more effective, you are going to empower your self-efficacy. So, the idea of being aware of oneself and reinforcement of oneself, this is important idea what we learn from Albert Bandura. So Albert Bandura tell us that in our life we have to show a realistic performance, a behavior in life. And in order to show a realistic performance, we must have sufficient level of self-adequacy. If we don't have sufficient level of self-adequacy, we are going to lose our connections with the reality of life. Thank you.